counter Raj is nothing new. Why won't an ordinary man clap when he is killed? Because in 2004 or 5 there is a murder, and in 2023 the prime witness is killed. Now where will the results come, and which witness will stand up to his testimony? First was the breach of access control. In technical terms, we know that ring around wasn't there to see that nobody gets close enough to do that, and that is exactly the fatal error, because they shot him at the back. Number two, the drills which they were going through, for example, the vehicle landing right on the road, parking itself, and then the prisoners walking. 2 prisoners who are highly threatened being chained together, so if you have a contingency plan, it's just impossible to escape. You can't allow a press conference just anywhere in what we say an uncontrolled environment.
Three shooters, 18 bullets, 50 seconds of bloody horror. Now that about sums up the end of dreaded mafia don Atiq Ahmed, a man who had terrorized Uttar Pradesh for decades. He lived with the gun, died with the gun. But those 50 seconds will forever haunt the image of Uttar Pradesh police, supposedly a very forward, modern-looking police. There are talks of complicity of the cops in the murder. That, of course, remains unproven. But even if the police were not complicit, the lackadaisical attitude of the cops who were with these 2 mafia dons and on their hospital visit in Prayagraj was shameful, to say the least. Now, to talk about Atiq Ahmed and his brother's sensational murder, barely 48 hours after his son was gunned down in an encounter by the same UP police, we have with us Yashovardhan Azad, former Central Information Commissioner and a retired IPS officer who has served as Secretary, Security and Special Director with the Intelligence Bureau. Sir, when you first heard of this, what was the first thing that crossed your mind?
I thought it was a fatal error on the part of UP police, absolutely shocking, because any kind of death in police custody is something to be wary of, because what are the implications, what has gone beyond it. And I would say from first impression which I got was it looked like a caricature of security, and therefore what happened was coming.
A caricature of security. I mean, those images are all imprinted in, I think, everyone's minds, given that the murder happened on live television. What exactly would you describe as caricature? I mean, because I saw no guns. There were no guns. These men was casually strolling out of the hospital, as so to speak, and they were of course they were in chains, handcuffed together apparently, and they were just walking down, and the media came and they were happily talking to the media. It just didn't look that they were in police custody at all.
So that's exactly what I was saying. This is a part of the caricature of security. When you handle security for a dreaded gangster or any very, very threatened person, there has to be a rigorous protection drill. And this protection drill cannot be, enforced by ordinary cops. They have to be trained personal protection people, and there are plenty of them in UP, and they could have got from Lucknow. What was happening there was, first was the breach of access control. In technical terms, we know that ring around wasn't there to see that nobody gets close enough to do that, and that is exactly the fatal error, because they shot him at the back. Number two, the drills which they were going through, for example, the vehicle landing right on the road, parking itself, and then the prisoners walking. 2 prisoners who are highly threatened being chained together, so if you have a contingency plan, it's just impossible to escape. Number 4, the personal protection team did not have revolvers with them, they didn't have arms, they didn't have bulletproof vests, the dreaded gangsters were not doing the proper drill by wearing the proper vests. And lastly, you can't allow a press conference just anywhere in what we say an uncontrolled environment. So I would say that the security laid out looked to me, absolutely sedentary and pedestrian. And if it has come about, it has come out in a manner which was very well planned. So how can this kind of a security, stand against a well planned murder?
You talked about the security. There was, one thing that stood out for me was, the shooting, and there were no revolvers when that, in sight when that happened. But immediately when they caught the three killers, they suddenly had revolvers in their hands. So clearly they had the guns, but probably in their pockets or cocked down or not cocked up.
You're talking about the killers.
I'm talking about the police.
The policemen. Yes, the policemen were trying to grab them from the back. And you see, the focus of the media, of course, was on the shooters while they were shooting with their Turkish guns. But if you see the reaction of the policemen, the reason given is that they did not fire because of the crowd. Where was the crowd? The entire sequence, when you see, they are right there behind the shooters and trying to not grapple, in fact, grab them from the back. But the real fact is that the shooters just surrendered themselves after that. So there was enough time in those 20 seconds. That's exactly what the protection specialists are there for. The moment anybody takes out a gun, your first job is to protect the protectee. First job is to protect. So that will give you hardly 5 seconds. Here you are getting 20 seconds. So all that excuse does not work. And whenever you are a protection specialist, when you are going around a protectee, your gun should be ready, in readiness to fire. So it should take hardly about 2-3 guns to switch it out and do the job. In that respect, it was a fairly amateurish kind of an attempt to grab them from the back.
And Atiq, and this coming from a police which is now known, and from a state which prides itself on its law and order preparedness as on date, which prides itself on getting law and order in the state back to a certain level. Atiq himself had expressed fears over his life to the court, and in fact UP police itself had announced a threat to Atiq's convoy. So it's not that they didn't know or they didn't perceive the threat.
That's exactly the point. I mean, the 2 points which you have mentioned necessitated a proper protection team, which the UP police did not do. Not UP, it's basically the Prayagraj police. There are many issues in this. In fact, where was the reason of getting that guy from Sabarmati jail? Video conferencing. Technologies today can be used very well, and this could have been done with video conferencing from the jail. And then you see the number of policemen, my goodness, when he was coming from Sabarmati, suddenly, gradually they kind of dissipated when the UP border was reached. He could have been brought in by a plane. And one very important point which I'd like to flag here is that if you have a dreaded gangster or a highly threatened protectee in your custody, and you have to ferry him across every day for medical, you could have easily requested the court that this has security implications, and therefore arrangements we can make of giving him that medical. After all, it was a routine medical checkup. It can be done at the place of his incarceration. So in that respect, there have been very serious flaws, and I think it's very difficult for the Prayagraj police to escape from it.
I've been listening to some of the defenses being thrown, to this very question thrown out by the police officers, saying that that he was in judicial custody, and therefore we don't really need. It's upon the judge whether or not he gets treated in the hospital, or whether he the hospital comes to the jail to treat him, and the judge didn't order that. So they've sort of pushed that ball back to the court. I mean, but you're saying that they could have requested.
I think he was in police remand since April 13. So he wasn't a police remand. And whether he's being taken from prison to this place, the protection has been given by the police. It's the police job to protect him while he's in their custody, whatever that period is. So if that has a grave security implication, they had every right. Why do you have video conferencing from the prison? You can have telemedicine also. You can have the person brought to the prison. If you would have asked the court would have happily agreed to that. Problem today in our country is that for simple issues which can be sorted out, we give a whole lot of excuses in the form of procedures, in the form of what we need to do is expediency, the need of the hour. That was not done.
All right, I have, there is also a lot of political bickering going on now, and there is, you're saying that this was a police error. The opposition, of course, is saying that this was a conspiracy in which the police were complicit, and maybe even the administration. They are pointing fingers at the Yogi administration. How, I'm not asking you to wax eloquent on what exactly happened, because you won't obviously know that, and I would want you to conjecture. But clearly, there is more to this than meets the eye. Would you clarify that as that, or would you just call it a simple police error, or rather a grave police error, not a simple one?
I have already said that it is a grave police error. And in fact, professionally, if you examine it, the serious flaws have been thrown up in the VIP protection scheme. I would call it VIP protection. I should say very threatened persons protection scheme. Now, as far as the conspiracy is concerned, yes, it can be unraveled. But the problem again is, why didn't the police take the police remand of these three accused?
Yes, they've been sent to judicial custody.
Only then this would have been raveled. If three people get expensive guns, if they are shooting very steadily and correctly, how do they coordinate? How do they get the press passes? How do they arrive at that particular place at that particular time? These are things which could have been gotten knowledge of if you got the police remand. So why the police remand wasn't taken is a mystery to me also. So it should have been done. Now, the other part, I wouldn't like to conjecture at all, because the opposition parties will say law and order this is a specific incident we are talking about. Law and order means a series of incidents and failures and things like that. So I will stick to only this incident, where I would say it is a fatal police error.
Okay, just a couple of days ago, the son, Atiq Ahmed's son, shot down in an encounter. It's the UP. Given the number of encounters that have happened in the recent past, would you say that, because that's another accusation that is coming the way of the Yogi administration, that encounter Raj ho gaya hai. This is something like in the 80s, what we used to see perhaps in Bombay, where there were these encounter specialists who would
90s,
yeah, between the 80s and the 90s, then encounter specialists who sort of became heroes, but that culture is thankfully, then it disappeared, and now suddenly a couple of decades later it's resurfacing in UP. Would you
see, the encounter in Jhansi was 183rd. Let me remind you that UP's encounter Raj is nothing new. From 2002 to 2008, I think of around 475 encounters which took place all over the country, 231 was with UP, number one. From 2009 to 2013, again UP topped in the number of encounters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the badlands of UP, the soil produces some kind of a mushrooming of mafias, which get a very benevolent disposition, powers that be in one regime, and then, for example, it gives a ripe, again, atmosphere, environment for encounters in the next regime.
Okay.
This is the sad part. Unless you set right the political environment which sort of supports and helps the mafia. 5 times MLA Atiq was there, 100 cases were launched, 40 cases were dropped, 8 High Court judges recused hearing. What does it show? Why won't an ordinary man clap when he is killed? Because in 2004 or 5 there is a murder, and in 2023 the prime witness is killed. Now where will the results come, and which witness will stand up to his testimony? So when your criminal justice system lies in tatters, obviously encounter killings will be celebrated, and that's the tragedy of our democracy.
What would you, as a former police officer yourself, and somebody who's had a bird's eye view of the entire system from the Intelligence Bureau, what kind of reforms do you think that the criminal justice system needs today?
Hundreds.
I'm sure you can do, but
Hundreds.
The starting points. How do we begin reforming?
When we talk about criminal justice reforms, basically we are talking about reforms in the police, we are talking reforms in the prisons, we are talking reforms of the prosecution, and we are talking reforms of the judiciary. First of all, the decisions which are coming in 20 to 30 years, unless you do something about it, this is going to be a serious problem. How do we do it? Do we do it? Should the courts be digital? Should we fill up all the vacancies? Should we stop giving extended hearings whenever the accused lawyer comes and asks for a separate date? Should we have a fast track courts with a regular hearing completely? That will be one of the best reforms which we can do in the judiciary. Number two, the prosecution. I think it's a third-rate prosecution we have. The prosecution which is, look at the lawyers who are coming from the accused side, some of the best in the land,
right,
because they have the money for whether it's the underworld, whether it's some biggest gangster, and who are the kind of lawyers which we are having from hardly anything. The police itself doesn't have proper lawyers to back them up and tell them how to, marshal evidence properly, how to put the investigation together. Then the prisons, what kind of prisons we have, where people are able to run their extortion empire which was being run by all these mafia dons. And the police, I won't like to say anything, because today the police itself is saying, please reform me. But the state governments don't want to reform. No CM wants to let go of his complete stranglehold over the police. But I will still say there are 10 or 11 points around which a unanimity can be built. For example, a softer touch, more women in police stations. Why can't you do that straight away? Better prosecution, better forensics. These are going to help the investigation
and make a stronger case
against these people. So we can begin, but the problem is that the lawmakers don't have time for this. This is a hard job. From Malimat committee to there are so many committees which have suggested reforms. But when we are talking about control over Netflix and OTT platforms, we don't have time to control, at least control the tickets given to mafias in the elections. That also is not done. So, I would just like to say in the end, the badlands of UP, Hindi belt or entire country will keep throwing up mafias. The mushrooming of mafias will continue, another regimes will be shooting them down, and let me tell you, even in the state of UP, there are other mafias. They are still there. If you want to have zero tolerance, then you have to pursue the cases against each of them religiously with greater coordination from all the authorities concerned.
And you're saying that is not possible without political will, which you think is not going to be forthcoming.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for talking to us, sir. Thank you so much for watching, viewers. There you heard from the man who's been at the helm for so many years, so many decades, that the problem is not something that is new. The badlands of UP will keep producing these goons and these mafias till the time there is a political will to stop this political support. And these kind of incidents are something that, this incident, for instance, the Atiq shooting, whether the police was complicit or not, the fact is that it is a very, very grave error on the parts of Prayagraj police, who is involved, who is not involved. We're not going to get into that now. There is no evidence to support that. But the fact is that it is a shameful blot on the image of Uttar Pradesh police as we know it now. Thank you.